So this morning we have a special treat. Mark Twain was a writer that wrote in the latter half of the 19th century. He was strictly an American writer. And he is considered to be the first modern American writer because he wrote in idioms and he wrote in informal style. He infused lots of humor in his work. And he also used his writing to comment on social ills in society. So he was a satirist and a humorist, but also a philosopher, really. He wrote Tom Sawyer, he wrote Huckleberry Finn, he wrote The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. These are some of his greatest works. He also wrote a lot of essays, serious essays too. And he was a journalist. He was a reporter who traveled around the West as well. So we're going to read, the beginning is a little biography of Mark Twain. And then we're going to read one of his short stories, which is somewhat humorous and also has a little bit of a moral lesson as well. Okay, so let's get started with Josh. Why don't we begin with you, Josh? And let me just get this down here. Okay, and you can start here. It says here, the best short works of Mark Twain, The Assault of Laughter, and a few writers in history.
Few writers in history have been as widely read or as widely written about as Mark Twain. He was a prolific talent, a complex figure whose genius as a satirist and storyteller of the Old West established his reputation as an American original. The best short works on Mark Twain offers readers a unique opportunity to experience not only the breadth and depth of Twain's humor and insight, but also the evolution of his exceptional literary craft.
Good. And what does the word prolific mean? He was a prolific talent. What does it mean to be prolific? Okay, circle that word. So prolific means very productive. He wrote a lot of things. Okay, so a prolific writer is somebody that writes a lot of books. Okay, so that's important. And what is a satirist? What is satire? Do you guys know what satire is? Can you describe satire? Go ahead. It's anybody. Christine? Eric, how about you? What's that?
No, nothing.
Okay, so how about you, Eric? Do you know what satire is? Basically what it is
No.
it's making fun of something. So a satire is meant to... Go ahead.
Isn't a satire supposed to make fun of somebody, like say satire about a tyrant, basically putting them in a funny version to make, yeah.
Yeah, it makes fun of someone. You're exaggerating some feature that becomes ridiculous. When you do a satire, you're mimicking them, but in a way that is designed to create ridicule. So a satirist uses humor to attack something that they think is not legitimate. Okay, so satire is a very powerful tool. Okay, good. Go ahead, Eric. The 57 stories collected in this edition.
The 57 stories collected in this edition span over 40 years of the author's life, from his early days as a frontier journalist with the story that made him famous, the notorious jumping frog of
It's the notorious jumping frog of Calaveras County.
The notorious jumping frog of Calaveras County. To the groundbreaking slave narrative, a true story that foreshadowed his masterpiece, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, to later works such as The Man That Corrupted Heidelberg, that illustrate Twain's brilliant precision in the short story form.
Good. So what does the word notorious mean? The notorious jumping frog.
Does it mean like something bad that's famous?
Exactly right. Something infamous. They call that infamy. It's fame, but in a negative way. When someone's notorious, they're not necessarily good, but they're well known. Good work. Okay, Claire. In How to Tell a Story, Twain writes, Claire, you ready?
Sorry, yep. Okay, wait. In How to Tell a Story, Twain writes, there are several kinds of stories, but only one different kind, the humorous. When reading the best short works of Mark Twain, one finds it hard to imagine the author had difficulty telling any story. Twain's language is so fluid, his ear for dialect so acute, that his narratives appear effortless and not, as they were in actuality, product of studied word choice and careful revision. The genre of Twain's short stories are varied and numerous: tall tales, burlesques, fables, yarns, ghost stories, though his humor remains constant.
You can go ahead and finish. Yeah, Twain used humor
as a weapon against racism, greed, and hypocrisy, viewing his wit as a means of encouraging reformation. Against the assault of laughter, he wrote in The Mysterious Stranger, nothing can stand.
So against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. What does that mean? Christine,
Yeah.
what do you think that sentence means? Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. Well, it means we can use humor to destroy an idea or destroy a person so that nobody takes them seriously, or an idea that you basically undo the idea. You disrobe it and make it obvious that it's absurd. So you can use laughter as a great political tool and a great philosophical tool. If you can make people laugh at somebody or something, then they don't take it seriously anymore. So you can destroy it, you know? So humor can be used as a great tool. Now, what is dialect in a short story or a novel? What does the word dialect mean? D-I-A-L-E-C-T. Who knows? Anybody? So dialect is the word spoken by the characters in the story. So if the story says, you know, Tom went out to the barn and he called for Becky, right? And then he said, hey, Becky, where are you? That is dialect, okay? So remember that word, because it's the way that you weave dialect into a story that makes the story great, okay? Good. All right, guys, let's move on. Okay, Christine, it's your turn to read, honey. And I'm trying to get down to the text. Here we go. Let's see. There we go. Okay, Mark Twain was born.
Mark Twain was born Samuel Langhorne Clemens on November 30, 1835, in Florida, Missouri. When he was born, Halley's Comet, which passes close to Earth every 76 years, was visible in the night sky, an astronomical event that ancients considered an indicator that something of great historical significance was about to happen. Twain was well aware that he was born under this auspicious sign, and he sometimes made humorous reference to it. When Mark Twain died on April 21st, 1910, Halley's comet was again blazing across the sky. It seems fitting that the life of so unusual a man should contain such conspicuous, celestial,
Yeah, celestial.
bookends. His life spanned a particularly dramatic portion of U.S. history, and he managed to be right in the thick of the action for most of it.
Very nice. What is a conspicuous celestial bookend? What are they talking about in the paragraph? Conspicuous means easily seen. Celestial means of the sky. And bookends are one end and the other end of something. So what are they talking about? Anybody? They mention it right there, right? Halley's Comet. And why is it a conspicuous celestial bookend? Well, Halley's Comet comes into view in the night sky every 76 years. It's been doing that ever since ancient history. People have recorded Halley's Comet 2,000 years ago. And it comes with regularity every 76 years. Now, you guys will probably see it because the last time it came was 1986. And none of you guys were alive then, but I saw it in 1986. I got to see Halley's Comet in the night sky. And you guys will see it again. So if it was here in 86, when will it be here again? 76 years. What year would that be, Josh? It'd be 2062, right?
Oh my God, I'm reading a book and then they're also talking about the Halley's Comet. And then it was set exactly in 2061.
Okay, well, maybe 61, 62, but anyway, that's when it'll be. You guys will be alive. I'll be long gone, but you guys will be alive to see it. It'll be awesome. Anyway, Twain was born the year of Halley's Comet, and he died the year of Halley's Comet. He lived for 76 years. Okay, good job. All right, Josh, go ahead and Samuel Clemens started out, that was his birth name, but then he took on the name Mark Twain after a while. Samuel Clemens started out
in modest surroundings in a respectable family of 6 children in Missouri. The Clemens family had been settling in Hannibal, Missouri for several years when young Samuel's father died. Leaving the family in a difficult financial position, Samuel quit school at age 12 and took several odd jobs before becoming apprenticed to a local printer. In this capacity, he gained exposure to a wide range of writing, and he discovered he had the talent and ambition to become a writer himself. He soon launched a career as a sort of traveling reporter, writing humorous sketches and articles for newspapers in cities such as St. Louis, New York, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati. In 1857, he headed to New Orleans with plans to travel by ship to South America. Instead, he apprenticed himself to a riverboat captain and spent the next 2 years traveling up and down the Mississippi River.
Yeah, eventually he became a riverboat captain, which was a big deal because those boats were big and they moved pretty fast, and the river had a lot of obstacles, a lot of currents. You had to be very skilled to be a riverboat captain. He learned a lot riding up and down the Mississippi. Where did he go to college? Does it say? Doesn't say. You know why? Because he never went to college. He was self-taught, self-educated. Okay, so he was quite an amazing genius, writing some of the most important works in American literature, never having gone to college. So we have to really take note of that. He was self-educated, probably just read and read and read and absorbed a lot of what he read. Okay, good. Eric, hostilities between the North and South. This is the Civil War now. Remember, he lived during the Civil War.
Hostility between the North and South brought commercial traffic on the Mississippi to a halt in 1861, and Clemens had to give up his fledgling.
That means early career, just starting to develop.
His fledgling career. He served as a soldier in the group of Confederate volunteers in 1861, but quit after a couple of weeks and decided to head out to the Nevada territory, where the legendary Comstock lode had been struck in 1859. The Comstock lode was a huge silver and gold deposit that produced hundreds of millions of dollars worth of the precious metals. His luck as a prospector was not so good, and Samuel turned once again to newspaper work, writing for the Territorial Enterprise in Virginia City. In 1863, he began signing his articles, Mark Twain, as impression used by riverboat crewmen to refer to a safe navigating depth of 2 fathoms.
Fathoms. Okay. What's a prospector? What is a prospector? His luck as a prospector was not so good. What does that mean? Anybody? What do you think that means? He went out there because there was huge gold and silver deposits, and he thought he would make millions of dollars. Well, a prospector is somebody that is seeking out gold or seeking out silver. In other words, trying to mine gold or mine silver to make money. Okay, but he wasn't a very good prospector. So he started writing again. And the word Mark Twain, the expression Mark Twain, was used by the riverboat captains. They would stick a pole into the river, into the water, and see how far down the pole went before it hit the bottom of the river. What does Twain mean? Twain means two, right? Mark Twain, Mark two. So what is a fathom? Does anyone know what a fathom is? Okay, a fathom is 6 feet. So 2 fathoms is 12 feet. So if you say Mark Twain, it means that it's 2 fathoms deep, 12 feet deep, which is about what, 4 meters. And that's deep enough so that the boats would not run aground. There was enough water underneath them that they would not hit the bottom. So this became an expression that riverboat people would use, saying Mark Twain is safe. We can ride our riverboats up and down. Okay, so, and he said, oh, I like that, Mark Twain. So he turned it into his pen name. And after that, that's how he was known, as Mark Twain. But his real name was Samuel Clemens. Okay, so Christine, how deep is 2 fathoms? How many meters?
I don't know.
Anybody? Remember, I said 1 fathom is 6 feet, 2 fathoms is 12 feet. There's about 3 feet in a meter. Quick division. How deep in meters is Mark Twain, or 2 fathoms? Right? Does anybody? Come on, I just told you guys. 4 meters, right? 4 times 3 is 12, right? So just think of it as 4 meters deep, Mark Twain. Okay, good. Let's see here. Claire, in 1864, Twain.
In 1864, Twain, as he now is known professionally, started working for a San Francisco paper, traveled with the paper to what are today called the Hawaiian Islands. He wrote about his travels, lectured about Hawaii upon his return to San Francisco. In many ways, Twain introduced Hawaii to the U.S. mainland, stimulating the tourism to the island that began in the...
Yeah, no, I gotta scroll here. I'm having a tough time with this here. In the 1860s.
In the 1860s, Twain continued to travel extensively in Europe and the Holy Land for a couple more years. In 1870, he married Olivia Langdon. They settled in Hartford, Connecticut.
Good. What is the, hold on one second. What is the Holy Land? People refer to the Holy Land. What are they referring to? What modern day country is the Holy Land located in?
Italy.
No, it's Israel. Israel.
Oh.
Because it's where Christ was, right? Israel, where
Yeah.
see, right? The Temple of David, the Wailing Wall, all of that, right? The mountain of Golgotha, where outside Jerusalem, where Christ was crucified. All of those historic places.
And the irony.
Bethlehem, where Christ was born. Jerusalem, where he died. Right? Bethpage, where he got off the donkey and walked on his
I know it's
journey.
kind of like irony because like Israel's now kind of like dangerous because of war.
Because what?
Isn't Israel right now like kind of like brewing with war and then?
Oh yeah, well, it's surrounded by Muslim countries that want to destroy it. So Israel is really, yes, they're in a very precarious situation. They have to constantly be on guard. They're outnumbered tremendously.
Okay.
Outnumbered like 100 to 1. But I mean, you just have to think about the whole, when you say the Holy Land, and there are a lot of people now who are evangelical Christians who want to go visit the Holy Land. They want to see where Christ walked, where he was born, where he died, the first followers, and so on and so forth. Okay, good work. Christina, he published The Prince and the Pauper.
Published The Prince and the Pauper, a popular success in 1881, but Twain reached his literary zenith.
Literary zenith.
Literary zenith in 1885 with the publication of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Though controversial, the book was widely recognized as an important achievement in American literature. Twain followed it up with the publication of several more books, including a
Connecticut. Connecticut is a state.
Connecticut
Yankee, an American. A Yankee is an American.
Arthur's Court, 1889, and
Pudd'nhead Wilson.
Pudd'nhead Wilson.
So what is a pauper? The Prince and the Pauper. What is a pauper? Anyone know? Okay, it's a pauper, somebody with nothing, no money, no possessions, a very poor person. Okay. Nowadays you might call him a homeless person. Okay. So that's important to remember. And so he wrote a lot of books: Roughing It, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Prince and the Pauper, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which is his classic, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, Pudd'nhead Wilson. All of these books were widely read and very popular. So he was a very famous author by the time he was an old man. Okay. The 1890s proved tragic for Twain. Go ahead, Josh.
The 1890s proved tragic for Twain. He had made a number of questionable investments, and the nationwide financial panic of 1893 left him bankrupt. He was forced to book a worldwide lecture series to rebuild his fortune. The tour cemented his professional reputation, and he earned the admiration of many of the leading artists and writers of Europe. So his fame grew, his family suffered. In 1896, his daughter Susie died of
meningitis.
After a long illness, his wife died in 1904. In 1909, his daughter Jean died. Twain was left bitter and lonely. His later works, such as What is Man, 1906, was especially dark and cynical, reflecting his emotional state. He died in Connecticut in 1910, and although only his daughter Clara outlived him, thousands of mourners filed past his casket to pay their respects at his funeral.
Yeah, he had a really hard time later in life because he lost his family. So he had a boy was born to him who died at age 2. And then he had his 3 daughters and his wife. Now his wife died, and Jean and Susie died. So there was only one daughter left, Clara. And I think he was living with Clara when he died. The other thing that's interesting is Mark Twain was good friends with, gosh, I can't remember her name. The woman that was blind and deaf. And
you mean what was her name? Wasn't it like
she couldn't see, she couldn't hear, she could speak but not really speak. But
Helen Keller.
Helen Keller. They were very close friends, and there's an interesting story about Helen Keller. She used to go visit Mark Twain, and she was able to put her fingers on people's lips and know the words that they were saying. So a lot of times she would go visit Mark Twain, and he loved her and she loved him. And she would sit next to him in the library, and he would read to her one of his short stories, and she would keep her fingers on his lips the whole time, so she would know exactly what he was saying. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's like what's meningitis?
What's that, honey?
Meningitis, like the
Oh,
illness?
meningitis. Meningitis is an infection of the membranes around the brain. And bacterial meningitis is pretty much universally fatal. if you don't get antibiotics. Of course, back in 1896, they didn't have antibiotics. So when she got meningitis, she died. Yeah, people still get meningitis today, but if you catch them early enough and give them really high dose antibiotics, you can save them. But if you wait too long, they can die within a day. It can progress very quickly. So yeah, meningitis is not a joke. All of you have been vaccinated against meningitis. I don't think you know that, but you have been. Okay. Meningococci, they're called meningococci, are the bacteria that cause meningitis in young people. And they didn't have a vaccine for it when I was young. But I bet all of you have already been vaccinated. Pretty much it's a required vaccine now. Okay, this is his short story, The Notorious Jumping Frog of Calaveras County. And it's kind of an amusing story. So I want to read this together with you because you get a sense of Twain's style and how he uses dialect, okay? So it's kind of a real cool example of his writing. So let's begin. Josh, why don't we start with, actually, Eric, in compliance with the request of a friend of mine.
In compliance with the request of a friend of mine who wrote me from the East, I called on good-natured, garrulous old Simon Wheeler and inquired after my friend's friend.
Leonidas
W. Smiley, as requested to do, and I here unto append the result. I have a lurking suspicion that Leonidas W. Smiley is a miss, that my friend never knew such a percentage, and that he only conjectured that if I asked old Wheeler about him, it would remind him of his infamous Jim Smiley, and he would go to work and bore me to death with some exasperating reminiscence of him, as long and as tedious as it should be useless to me. If that was the design, it succeed.
Good. So what does it mean to append something? And I hear unto append the result. It means to add something, to add. So he's going to tell you the story now. He's giving you an introduction. He's appending the result. The result is the story. And he's supposed to go to this guy and ask him about Leonidas W. Smiley. But Leonidas doesn't exist. The real story is about Jim Smiley. And he says, if you ask old Simon Wheeler about Leonidas Smiley, he'll tell you a story about Jim Smiley. And an exasperating reminiscence. Can anyone tell me what a reminiscence is? What are you doing when you reminisce? Usually what it means is reminiscing means you're remembering something from the past. And usually it's something interesting and pleasant, right? You don't really reminisce about tragedy. You reminisce about some interesting time in your life or some experience that you had. So it's kind of like remembering. So a reminiscence is a telling of a story about the past. And what does exasperating mean? Exasperating. Who can guess at the meaning of that word? Claire?
Is that
Exasperating. Frustrating and annoying. Exasperating reminiscence. In other words, like the guy just is boring. He tells these long stories about the past, and they're really not that interesting. And you got to be polite, but it's really a pain to have to listen to him. Okay, so let's move on. I found Simon Wheeler, Claire. I found Simon Wheeler dozing.
I found Simon Wheeler dozing comfortably by the bare-room stove of the dilapidated tavern in the decayed mining camp of Angels. I noticed that he was fat and bald-headed, and an expression of winning gentleness and simplicity upon his tranquil countenance. He roused up and gave me a good day. Told him that a friend of mine had commissioned me to make some inquiries about a cherished companion of his boyhood named Leonidas W. Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, a young minister of the gospel we had heard at one time was the resident of the Angels camp. I added that Mr. Wheeler could tell me anything about this Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley. I would feel under many obligations to him.
In other words, I would be grateful to him. I would feel under obligation. So I really want to hear about this guy, Leonidas, who doesn't exist, right? What does dilapidated mean, Christine? A dilapidated tavern.
It means like broken down and like
Exactly. Exactly. It means really old and like decaying and nobody's taking care of it. It's dilapidated. That's good. So this dude is sitting in a chair, snoring. He's dozing in his chair right by the stove, and in this old tavern in a mining camp. And they're mining for gold. So remember, Mark Twain's writing the story, but he had experience in the gold mining camps, so he could write about them, right? Anyway, this dude is fat and bald, but he has a nice face. And he says to him, "Hey man, tell me the story. I would be really grateful." So now Simon is about to respond. Okay, so Christine, Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blockaded me.
Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blocked me there with his chair, and then sat down and reeled off the monotonous narrative which follows this paragraph. He never smiled, he never frowned, he never changed his voice from the gentle flowing key to which he tuned his initial sentence. He never betrayed his slightest suspicion
Yeah, he never betrayed the slightest suspicion of what?
of enthusiasm, but all through the interminable narrative, there reigned a vein of impressive earnestness
Yeah.
and sincerity, which showed me plainly that so far from his imagining that there was anything ridiculous or funny about his story, he regarded it as a really important matter and admired its two heroes as men.
As men, and then it goes on. But let's go back and look at, what does monotonous mean? Monotonous narrative. Anybody? Eric. Monotonous. Does anyone know? Claire. Josh.
Wait, what again? Can you repeat?
Can you hear me? Monotonous. What does monotonous mean?
Does it mean like same thing over and over again?
Yeah, mono
Like
is one,
boring.
and tone is sound, right? Monotonous is something that basically is boring. It's just droning on and on with no variation, right? So a monotonous narrative is like, oh, he's just talking and talking and talking. He never changed his voice, right? Just kept talking and talking. And he never betrayed the slightest suspicion of enthusiasm. That's a joke right there. That's a little tongue in cheek. In other words, he never once acted like he cared a lot about the story. He was just telling it, just in a monotonous tone, just telling the story. But all through the interminable, what does interminable mean? What is termination? Anybody? Okay, termination is ending. Interminable means unending. So this narrative just seemed to go on forever, right? But there ran a vein. See, the vein is what you find in the rocks, a vein of gold. So he's using a little mining term there. Vein of impressive earnestness. Being earnest means sincere, right? Forthright. So he was trying to tell the story the right way. And he never felt, Simon Wheeler, as he was telling you the story, he never felt that the story was funny in any way or ridiculous, right? And admired its two heroes, the two heroes of the story, as men of transcendent genius in finesse. Now, what does transcendent genius mean? What does transcendent mean? When you transcend something, what are you doing? What does descend mean? Descend.
Take something to a lower level.
Go down, right? To descend. Ascend is to go up. Trans means over. So when you transcend, what are you doing? You're going over something, right? So the word is used essentially when to transcend something is not just to overcome it, but to completely leave it behind, to be so much better than that. You can transcend all the difficulties of your childhood and become a brilliant surgeon, transcend all of the pain and suffering of war and become a great hero. Okay, so having transcendent genius means you're smarter than just about anyone on earth. You go over them. A genius in finesse. Now he highlights the word finesse, he italicizes it. What he means by finesse is manipulation. In other words, cheating people. So it's a very interesting choice of words, but he's being funny here, right? Like a pickpocket has great finesse. He can pick your pocket, you don't feel it, right? Okay. I let him go on this way and never interrupted him once. Okay, here we go. Now, now this is now Simon Wheeler telling the story, okay? So go ahead, Josh. Reverend Leonidas, there was a fellow here once by the name of Jim Smiley. There it is. Now he's going back to Jim. So go ahead and read for us, Josh.
Reverend Leonidas WHM, well, there was a fellow here once by the name of Jim Smiley in the winter of 49, or maybe it was the spring of 50. I don't recollect exactly. Somehow, what makes me think it was one or others because I remember the big flu weren't finished when he first come to the camp. But anyway, he was a curious man about always betting on anything that turned up you ever see. If he could get anybody to bet on the other side, and if he couldn't, he changed sides. Anyway, that suited the other man would suit him. Anyway, just so he got a bet, he was satisfied. But still, he was lucky, uncommon lucky. He most always come out winner. He was always ready and waiting for a chance. There couldn't be no solitary scene mentioned, but that feller offered to bet on it and take any side you please. As I was just telling you, if there was a horse race, you find him flush or you find him busted at the end of it. If there was a dog fight, he bet on it. If there was a cat fight, he bet on it. If there was a chicken fight, he bet on it. Why? If there was two birds sitting on a fence, he would bet you which one would fight first. What if there was a camp meeting? He would be the regular to bet on Parson Walker, which he judged to be the best exhorter about here. And so he was too, and a good man. If he even see a stray bug start to go anywhere, he would bet you how long it would take him to get to wherever he was going to. And if you took him out, he would follow that stratorbug to Mexico. But what he would find out where he was bound for and how long he was on the road. Lots of the boys here has seen that Smiley and can tell you about him. Why? He never made no difference to him. He bet on anything. The dangest fellow. Parson Walker's wife laid a very sick one for a good while, and seemed as if they weren't going to save her. But one morning he came in, and Smiley up and asked him how she was, and he said she was considerable better. Thank the Lord for his infinite mercy and coming on so smart that with the blessing of Providence she get well. Yeah, and Smiley before he saw it says, "Well, I'll risk 2.5. She don't anyway."
What's that? Why is that funny? So we have this guy, Jim Smiley. He'll bet on anything. He'll bet on anything. You know, two birds sitting on a fence. Which one will fly away first? A bug. How long will it take him to get where he's going? I mean, there's nothing that he would see that he wouldn't bet on, and he would always generally win. He was really manipulative, right? And pretty smart at getting other people's money. So at the end, it tells a story here about the parson. A parson is a preacher. He's like a pastor, a priest. So he's like the holy man in town. And his wife was really sick. And she was in bed and it looked like she was going to die. And then Smiley goes up to the parson and says, "Well, how's she doing?" The parson says, "Oh, thank the Lord. In his infinite mercy, she's getting better. Looks like she's going to live." And then Smiley goes, "Well, I'll risk 2.5 cents that she doesn't get better." So he's betting the parson that his wife's going to die. You see what I'm saying? It's totally ridiculous. I mean, it's absurd, right? but that's that's Mark Twain's humor. So Jim Smiley is addicted to gambling, and he'll gamble on anything. That's what we need to know. Good, nice work, Josh. Okay, Eric. This year, Smiley had a mare.
This
A
year,
mare.
Smiley had a mare. The boys called her the 15-minute snack, but that was only in fun, because of course she was faster than that. And he used to win money on that horse, for all she was so slow and always had the asthma or the distemper or the consumption or something of that kind. They used to give her 200 or 300 yards stop and then pass her underway. But always at the fag end, the race she'd get excited and separate like and come cavorting and straddling up and scattering her legs around limber, sometimes in the air and sometimes out.
Yeah, let's God, this damn thing, it's a pain in the butt. Okay, so he has this horse that's sick, right? And he's always betting on the horse that the horse can outrun other horses. Okay, keep going to one side. Her legs scattered to one side.
To one side among the fences and kicking up more dusk and racing more racket with her coughing and sneezing and blowing her nose, and always fetch up at the stand just about a neck ahead, as near as you could cipher it down.
Cipher means to figure out or to understand, like decipher. So basically he has this horse, right? And the horse looks really sick. It's wheezing and it's like in terrible shape. And then people bet their horses against his horse. And because his horse is so sick, they give his horse like a 200-yard lead because they figure the horse is not going to make it. And then during the race, the other horse catches up and passes Smiley's horse. But then before the race is over, just at the very end, Smiley's horse always manages to catch up and beat the other horse by one neck, just by 1 foot or 2 feet. And so he would constantly wins money. So this is a horse that, is perfect, right? It looks like it can't win, but then it wins. So Smiley's making a lot of money with this horse. Okay, good. Claire, and he had a little small bull pup.
And he had a little small bull pup that to look at you'd think he wasn't worth a cent, but said to sit around a corner and wait for a chance to steal something. But as soon as money was up on him, he was a different dog. His underjaw began to stick out like a forecastle of a steamboat, and his teeth would uncover and shine like the furnaces. A dog might tackle him, bullyrag him, bite him, and throw him over the shoulder 2 or 3 times. And Andrew Jackson, which was the name of the pup, Andrew Jackson would never let on but what he was satisfied, and hadn't expected nothing else. And bets being doubled and doubled on the other side all the time, till the money was all up, and all of a sudden he would grab the other dog just by the jit of its hind leg and freeze to it. Not chaw, you understand, but only just grip and hang on till they throwed up the sponge. If it was a year, Smiley would always come out and winner on that pup, till he harnessed a dog once that didn't have no hind legs because they'd been sawned off by a circular saw. The thing had gone too far enough, and the money was all up. He'd come to make a snatch for his pet hole to see a minute how he'd been imposed on, how the other dog had him in the door, so to speak. He peered surprised, and he sort of looked discouraged like. Didn't try no more to win the fight, and he got struck out bad. Gave Smiley a look as much as to say his heart was broke, and it was his fault for putting up a dog that hadn't no hind legs for him to take a bolt hole up, which is main dependence in a fight. And he limped off a piece, lay down, and died. It was a good pup. It was a good.
Let me go back. So the story about dog fighting, essentially, he's got this dog that looks really weak and small, but he wins a lot. And the reason he wins is because he grabs the hind leg of the other dog and holds on to it. Okay. He laid down and died.
It was a good pup. was that Andrew Jackson would have made a name for himself if he lived, for this stuff was in him and he had genius. I know it because he had no opportunities to speak of. And I don't understand to reason that a dog could make such a fight as he could under them in his cursed circumstances that he had no talent. It always makes me feel sorry when I think of the last fight of his and the way it turned out.
Okay, this is a funny story. So basically, he's got this little dog called Andrew Jackson. Who is Andrew Jackson?
Isn't he like the president? Something.
Yeah, he was the president of the United States in the 1840s, Andrew Jackson. He was also a war hero. He won the War of 1812.
Oh,
He
wait,
won the
satire about him.
It's a battle. Well, no, I mean, he named his dog Andrew Jackson. It's kind of funny that you name your dog after a president. But this dog would allow himself to lose in the beginning. He would let the other dog throw him up in the air and turn him around and bite him and jump on him, and he wouldn't fight back. And then when the people saw that the dog was losing, they would all bet more money. And Jim Smiley would keep taking the money. Oh, I'll bet you, I'll bet you, I'll bet you. Because he knew that in the end, his little dog was going to do one thing, just bite the back leg of the other dog and hold on until the other dog gave up. So he would win a lot of money because his dog looked really weak. Everybody bet against his dog and then his dog would win. But what happened in the last fight that made the dog lose and also give up and eventually die? What was the problem with the last fight that Andrew Jackson had against another dog? What was special about the other dog that made Andrew Jackson lose the fight? Does anybody know?
Because the dog didn't have a hind leg.
He had no hind legs because they'd been cut off by a saw. So the other dog only had 2 legs. So you got to imagine poor Andrew Jackson went to bite the hind legs, but there were no hind legs. And that was the only trick he knew to win a fight. So he wound up losing the fight, and then he got very discouraged and depressed. But you got to see the image now of a dog with 2 legs in a dog fight, winning. That's what's so funny about it, is the other dog only had 2 legs, but he won the fight because Andrew Jackson didn't know how to do anything except bite the hind leg. So it's kind of a ridiculous story, but it's funny. Okay, go ahead now. Christine, well, this year Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats.
Well, this year Smiley had rat terriers and chicken cocks and tomcats and all them kind of things till you couldn't rest and you couldn't fetch nothing for him to bet on, but he'd match you. He catched a frog one day and took him home and said he
Calculated.
calculated to educate him, and so he never done nothing for 3 months but sat in his backyard and learned that frog to jump. And you bet you he did learn him too. He'd give him a little punch behind, and the next minute you see that frog whirling in the air like a...
Yeah, he's training the frog to be a great jumper because he wants to start betting on the frog. Whirling in the air like a donut.
Whirling in the air like a donut. See him turn one somerset or maybe a couple if he got a good start and come down flat-footed and all right, like a cat. He got him up so in the matter of catching flies and kept him in practice so constant that he'd nail a fly every time as far as he could see him. Smiley said all the frog wanted was education and he could do most anything. And I believe him. Why? I've seen him set Daniel Webster down here on this floor. Daniel Webster was the name of the frog. And see now, flies, Daniel flies. And quicker you could wink, he'd spring straight up and snake the fly off and the counter there and float down on the floor against it as solid as a gob of mud and fall off scratching the side of his head with his
Hind foot, back foot.
Oh, hindfoot, as indifferent as if he had no idea he'd been doing any more any frog might do. You never see a frog so modest and straightforward as he was, for all he was so gifted, and when it come to fair and square jumping on a dead level, he could get over more ground at one straddle
Straddle, meaning one
straddle
jump.
than any animal of his breed you ever see. Jumping on a dead level was his strong suit, you understand. And when it come to that, Smiley would end up money on him as long as he had a red. Smiley was monstrous proud of his frog, and well he might be, for fellers that had traveled and been everywheres all said he laid over any frog that ever they see.
So this is dialect, right? That's why a lot of these words are misspelled, because this is Simon Wheeler talking, and he talks like a Southerner with no education. So you're seeing all these weird words that are misspelled because Mark Twain is trying to give you an idea of how they actually talk. Like quicker than you'd wink, he'd spring straight up, snake a fly off in the counter, right? Instead of off the counter here, and flop down the floor again, not again, as solid as a gob of mud. So you see, this is the idiomatic dialogue of Simon Wheeler, and Twain is trying to give you that idea, right? Who's Daniel Webster? Obviously, Daniel Webster is the name of the frog, but in real life, well, we got one animal named Andrew Jackson, and now we have another one named Daniel Webster. This is funny. I mean, Andrew Jackson was president. Who was Daniel Webster?
Did he create the Webster dictionary?
No, but his relative did.
Wow, his relative.
Merriam-Webster. I think they were cousins. But Daniel Webster was a senator in the U.S. Senate and was supposed to be the greatest public speaker in American history. He could stand up and give a speech for 1 hour with no notes, and people would write it down. It was like the most beautiful speech they had ever heard. He would just be able to do it without any notes. Had a prodigious memory, tremendous depth of education, and his gift for oratory. So Daniel Webster, when he would stand up in the Senate to speak, everybody would listen. And this guy named his frog Daniel Webster. It's funny. I mean, it's just funny. Anyway, so this frog gets trained by Smiley, and he becomes the greatest jumping frog ever. He can jump further than any other frog, and everybody tells Smiley, "Hey man, you got the best damn frog in the county, best frog we've ever seen." Okay, so, and the frog was humble too. He never acted like too proud about his jumping ability. He just did it, he just took it in stride, so to speak. Okay, Josh, well, Smiley kept the little beast in a little lattice box.
Well, Smiley kept the little beast in a little lattice box, and he used to fetch him downtown sometimes and wait for a bet. One day, a stranger in the camp, he was come across him with his box and says, "What might it be that you got in the box?" And Smiley says, sort of indifferent, like, "Might be a parrot or it might be a canary, maybe it's only just a frog." And the feller took it and looked at it careful and turned it around this way and says, "So it is. Well, what's he good for?" Well, Smiley says, "Easy and careless. He's good enough for one thing. I should judge. He can outjump any frog in Calaveras County."
Okay, good. So hold on one sec. So remember now, this is dialect, and the feller took it and looked at it careful and turned it round his way and that and says, so it is a frog. Well, what's he good for? You see the italicized there, Josh? What's he good for? Well, Smiley says, easy and careless. He's good enough for one thing. I should judge. He can outjump any frog in Calaveras County. See, so this is dialect, it's dialogue, right? And these two dudes are talking now to each other about the frog, about Daniel Webster. Okay, go ahead, Josh. The fellow took the box again.
The fellow took the box again and took another long, particular look. and gave it back to Smiley and says very deliberate. Well, he says, I don't see no hints about that frog that's any better than any other frog. Maybe you
Okay,
don't.
so hold on one sec. So we got two con men. What's a con man, Claire? What's a
A
con
con
man?
man person. A con man is a person who basically scams people out of money.
Scams people, right? He cheats them out of money, right? He manipulates them, fools them, and gets their money. But we got two con men here. We got Jim Smiley, and he just met this other con man, and now they're trying to con each other. The two con artists trying to con each other. So the other guy says, well, he says, I don't see no prints about this frog any better than any other frog. In other words, he's trying to egg on Smiley, you know, to get Smiley to bet with him. Okay, so, okay, good. You could stop, Josh. Eric, maybe you don't, Smiley says. Maybe you understand frogs and maybe you don't. Go ahead.
Maybe you don't, Smiley says. Maybe you understand frogs and maybe you don't understand. Maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you've had experience and maybe you ain't only a amateur, as it were. Anyways, I've got my opinion and I'll risk $40 that he can outjump any frog in Calaveras County.
So basically they're having a little discussion. And Smiley says to this guy, well, maybe you understand frogs and maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you've had experience and maybe you ain't only an amateur, as it were. An amateur, right, is somebody that's not an expert. But he says, but I'll bet $40 that this frog can outjump any frog in Calaveras County. So now he's challenging him, right, to getting into betting. Okay, good. Claire, and the fellow studied a minute. In other words, he was thinking about it. Go ahead.
And then the fella studied a minute and said kind of sad, like, well, I'm the only stranger here and ain't got no frog, but if I had a frog, I'd bet you.
Okay, so now the other guy is manipulating Smiley. I'm only a stranger here, and I ain't got no frog, but if I had a frog, I would bet you. So he's actually manipulating Smiley now. That these two con artists are going at each other. Okay, good. Christina, and then Smiley says,
And then Smiley says, that's all right. That's all right. If you'll hold my box a minute, I'll go and get you a frog. And so the feller took the box and put up his $40 along with Smiley's and sat down to wait.
go ahead, keep going, sweetie. So he sat there a good while.
So he sat there a good while thinking and thinking to himself, and then he got the frog out and prized his mouth open and took a teaspoon and filled him full of quail shot, filled him pretty near up to his chin and set him on the floor. Smiley, he went to the swamp and slopped around in the mud for a long time, and finally he catched the frog and fetched him in and give him to this feller, he says.
Good.
And he says,
So while Smiley's in the swamp looking for a frog, what does this other guy do? Josh.
He feeds a frog buckshot.
He opens he opens Daniel Webster's mouth and he takes quail shot and puts it into makes him swallow it, goes down into his stomach. What is quail shot, Claire? What's it made out of?
Wait, what again?
What is quail shot? What is it made out of?
I got no idea what to.
All right, let me explain this to you. Shot is little beads of lead. And when you have a shotgun, you don't shoot a single bullet. It's a little packet of basically of lead beads or lead fragments. So when you shoot, it spreads. The little pieces of lead fly through the air like a cloud of lead. And you can kill birds like quail. Quail is a bird. And it's a bird people eat. They love eating quail. So if you go quail hunting, you use a shotgun. So shot is made out of lead. What is the heaviest element that is not radioactive? Anybody? I just said it. Christine? You know what an element is, right? Like, an element is like, sodium, potassium, all that, argon, like the periodic table. What's the heaviest element on the periodic table that's not radioactive? Anybody? It's lead. Lead, guys, lead. So what's he filling this frog full of lead? He's filling Daniel Webster full of lead while Jim Smiley is down at the swamp getting another frog. Okay? You guys with me? Everybody? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So basically, what do you think is going to happen to this frog if he gets full of lead? Poor Daniel Webster's full of lead now. It's not going to go that easy for him, right? When he tries to jump. Okay. So he comes back and he says to the feller, Josh, now if you're ready, set him alongside Daniel Webster. Daniel, go ahead and read that.
Now, if you're ready, set him alongside of Daniel, with his forepaws just even with Daniel. Now I'll give the word. Then he says, 1, 2, 3, get. And him and the feller touch up the fox from behind, and the new frog hopped off lively, but Daniel gave a heave and hissed it off his shoulder. So like a Frenchman, but it weren't no use. He couldn't budge. He was planted as solid as a church, and he couldn't do more stir than if he was anchored out. Smiley was a good deal surprised, and he was disgusted too, but he didn't have no idea what the matter was, of course.
So what happened here, Josh? They had the jumping contest, and looks like the other fellow won, right?
Yeah.
Why did he win?
Daniel couldn't jump.
And why not?
It was too heavy for him.
He was full of lead. He was full of lead. He couldn't jump because he probably weighed like 3 pounds or something from all the lead. He heaved up. You see, it says that he couldn't budge. He was planted like as solid as a church. He couldn't do no more than stir if he was anchored. So he tried to jump, but he just had too much lead inside of him. He couldn't do it. So there we go. Right here now, Eric, the fellow took the money.
The fellow took the money and started away. And when he was going out at the door, he sort of jerked his thumb over his shoulder. So at Daniel's and says again, very deliberate. Well, he says, I don't see no pins about that frog that's any better than any other frog.
Right. So he's a complete con man, right? I mean, he totally fooled Jim Smiley, tricked him. And then as he's leaving with the money, he goes, well, I don't see nothing special about that Daniel Webster frog. He's kind of rubbing it in, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny. Okay, Claire, Smiley, he stood scratching his head.
Smiley, he stood scratching his head, looking down at Daniel a long time. At last he said, I do wonder what in the nation that frog throwed off for. Wonder if there ain't something that matter with him. He appears to look mighty baggy somehow. And he catch Daniel by the nape of the neck and hefted him and say, why, blame my cat if he don't weigh 5 pounds. Turn him upside down, he blacked out a whole double handful of shot. Then to see how it was, and he was the maddest man. He said, the frog Danners took out after the fellow, but he never catched him. And
okay, so he finally, Jim Smiley picks up Daniel, and he realizes he weighs like a ton, and then he turns him over, and all of this quail shot, these lead pellets, come out of Daniel. And he goes, and then he sees how it was. What does that mean? He sees how it was. What does that mean, Claire? Smiley sees how it was. What do you think the Twain is saying? In other words, Smiley figured out that he was.
sorry,
What's
I
that?
clicked on zero. Okay, so it's a wait. What was your?
Oh, the question was, and then he sees how it was. He see how it was, and he was the maddest man. What is he saying there?
He's saying like, maybe he likes. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he's just like mad, and then like.
Well, when he says see how it was, he realizes he was cheated. He realizes that the other guy cheated him, and he's mad, right? And he set the frog down and took out after the fellow. In other words, he's chasing him now because he knows he's been cheated, but he never catched him. He never caught him. Okay. Yeah. So that is it. And go ahead and finish now. And here Simon Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard. Now remember, this is the guy telling the story, Simon Wheeler. So he's in the middle of the story, and while he's telling the story, somebody calls his name, right? So go ahead and read that.
Here
Simon Wheeler heard his name called.
Here Simon Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard and got up to see what he wanted. And turned to me as he moved away. He said, "Just sit where you are, stranger, and rest easy. I ain't going to be gone a second."
Good. Okay, Christina. But by your leave, I did not think that a continuation of the history of the enterprising vagabond Jim Smiley. Go ahead and read that, honey.
But by your leave, I did not think that a continuation of the history of the enterprising vagabond.
Vagabond is like a bum. Jim Smiley was a bum.
Vagabond, Jim Smiley, would be likely to afford me much information concerning the Rev. Leonidas, where,
Go ahead. Leonidas W. Smiley.
Leonidas W. Smiley. And so I started away. At the door, I met the sociable Wheeler returning, and he buttonholed me and recommended.
So he's leaving because he's heard enough, right? He doesn't want to hear anymore. And then as he's going out the door, Simon Wheeler comes back inside, and go ahead, Christine. Well, this year Smiley
had a yaller one-eyed cow that didn't have no tail, only just a short stump like a banana,
but he says banana.
Banana, and however, lacking both time and inclination, I did not wait to hear about the afflicted
cow, yeah.
but took my leave.
So that's the end of the story. So what happens is he gets done telling the story about the frog. He's already told the story about the little dog, and he's told the story about the wheezing horse, right? And now he's about to tell the story about the one-eyed cow with no tail. But the person, Mark Twain, who's writing this, says, but I didn't have the time or the inclination, the desire. I didn't want to hear about the afflicted cow. In other words, the cow that was sick with no tail. To be afflicted with something is to be sick with it. But I took my leave. I left. So this is a great story, full of humor, and it's really, really funny. I mean, you got a dog named Andrew Jackson. You got a frog named Daniel Webster, and yeah.
Mr. Dr. Orfan, I kind of have to go because I have a class at 9 o'clock.
Okay, that's fine, honey. I'm going to let you all go. We just finished. So I just wanted to get a taste of Mark Twain and his humor. And this is classic American literature, and really, really very famous. And a lot of people love reading his stuff. Okay, I'll let you go. We'll meet again next week.
Okay, thank you.
Have a wonderful time. Take care, guys. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.